Hi, I'm Barrett with NINER Bikes. Today I'm going to show you how to disassemble, reassemble, and adjust the unique pivot hardware of the RIP9 RDO. Before you get started, here's a look at some of the tools you'll need to complete the job. Number 1, your favorite tool handle. Number 2, a torque wrench. Number 3, a 5mm Allen bit for your torque wrench. Number 4, an HG cassette lockering tool. Number 5, a 5mm Allen wrench. Number 6, a green pin spanner. And not shown here, you'll also need some blue Loctite. First thing you'll want to do, start with the frame with the wheel out of the frame. Next, grab your 5mm Allen wrench and remove the upper shock bolt. When the shock bolt's out, swing the shock forward to rest on a down tube. Be sure to support the rear triangle when you do this. Put the bolt aside. Grab your HG cassette lockering tool and put it into your favorite tool handle. And loosen the main pivot bolt. Be sure not to drop the serrated washer you'll find underneath the head of the pivot bolt. You can now put both aside. Grab your 5mm Allen wrench again. Access the seat stay pivot bolt from the outside. Remember, this will act like a left-hand thread, so you'll want to loosen it by turning it in the clockwise direction. Set both aside. You can now remove the non-drive side carbon rocker. Set it aside. Underneath, you'll find the adjuster cone. This is a normal right-hand thread, so loosen it by turning it counterclockwise. Remember, if it's too difficult to loosen by hand, the use of a green pin spanner on either side of the adjuster cone can help you break it loose. With the adjuster cone removed, remove the bearing from the non-drive side of the pivot and set it aside. Now, grab your 5mm Allen wrench again and loosen the drive side seat stay pivot. Remember to turn it in a clockwise direction, as it'll act like a left-hand thread when accessing the bolt from this side. With that bolt out, you can now allow the swing arm to come to a rest at the end of its travel, and you can remove the drive side carbon rocker with the main pivot spindle. The bearings we choose for the RIP9 RDO pivots are Enduro Max black oxide treated angular contact bearings. The Max part of the spec refers to the maximum number of bearings you'll find inside of the cartridge. This is an ideal choice for a bearing that's going to spend its whole life only rotating about this much. The maximum number of bearings helps spread out the impact that you'll find in a pivot location across a wider range of bearing surface. The black oxide refers to the treatment given to the outer and inner races of the bearing. It's a highly anti-corrosive treatment that withstands moisture and will prevent rust from pitting the races of the bearing, keeping it nice and smooth. Before reassembling your RIP9 RDO pivot, be sure to check the bearing surfaces and bearing seats inside of the seat tube for any dirt or debris. Remember, no grease is needed for either of these surfaces. Take one of the cartridge bearings, put it onto the main pivot spindle, install it from the drive side, and take the other bearing, install it from the non-drive side. Then, take your adjuster cone and thread it onto the main pivot spindle. Tighten the adjuster cone until there's no play felt in the bearings. This is similar to adjusting a headset, so not too tight, not too loose, just snug enough to eliminate all the play and have a nice smooth bearing feel. Next, we're going to install the drive side seat stay pivot bolt. Before installing the bolt, be sure to clean off any of the old blue Loctite that you'll find on there and apply fresh blue Loctite to just about half of the threads. Bring the swing arm up to the dry side carbon rocker and install the seat stay pivot bolt. Remember, when installing this bolt will act like a left-hand thread, so turn it counterclockwise from the outside to make it tight. You can then torque it down to spec of 9 Newton meters, which is printed on the head of the bolt. Next, grab your non-dry side carbon rocker and install it onto the main pivot. Grab the non-dry side seat stay pivot bolt and your 5mm Allen. Be sure to clean off the old blue Loctite and apply fresh blue Loctite. And install that. Remember, counterclockwise will make it tight from the outside. You can then torque this bolt to spec of 9 Newton meters as well. Next, grab your main pivot bolt, clean off the Loctite and apply fresh blue Loctite. Be sure the serrated washer is under the pivot bolt head. And thread the main pivot bolt all the way in. Don't torque it down just yet. Grab your upper shock bolt and a 5mm Allen and reinstall this before torquing the main pivot bolt. Now you can grab your HG cassette lock ring tool again and tighten the main pivot. Remember to have a torque wrench on hand that can handle the 9, 12, and 18 Newton meter torque spec of each bolt. When you're all finished, be sure to go back and check the torque of each. Again, the torque spec is on the top of the bolt. It's 9 Newton meters at the seat stay pivots, 12 Newton meters on the shock bolts, and 18 Newton meters on the main pivot. This is a highly anti-corrosive treatment, great for use in a bearing. It's going to go underwater and shit.